Hey everyone, this is Candace Cordelia, your host for In the Zone, and I am here with sports host Ariel Epstein. How are you doing, Ariel?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Excited to be here. I know this has been a work in progress for a little bit. Plus, just found out we're two Cuse alum. Makes it
Yeah,
even better.
I know. Shout out to SU, Syracuse University. I'm always excited to meet a fellow Q's alum, so kudos to that. So my first question for you, Ariel, we're just going to jump right into it as I like to do. Did little Ariel Epstein always dream of being on TV as a sports host?
Yes, I have always wanted to do this. Granted, when I was 9 years old and the dream was developed, I didn't think it would be in sports gambling. Yet, I always thought that being a sports talk show host or just going to games to get paid and talk about them was the coolest concept. My first game that I ever recall watching, aside for the 2000 Super Bowl, that's not when the dream clicked. The dream clicked when I was watching Yankees games. It was really the 2003 World Series. I thought it was so cool that the announcers were paid to go to a game and talk about it. Then in 2004 was absolutely hooked to the New York Yankees. I knew every single batter's stance on the Yankees team. In fact, I probably could have listed other players on other teams as well. I didn't miss a game. When I heard Michael Kay, who's the Yes Network Yankees announcer now here in New York, I thought, wow, Michael Kay, that's really cool. You get to do this for a living? That's sick. That's when the dream was established. Ever since then, my parents said, well, you're going to have to work really hard to do it. It's one of those kinds of dreams where if you don't start young, then you're not going to get those opportunities. Sure enough, ninth grade, my parents said to me, hey, I know somebody that works at a local newspaper in our area. You should go and do an internship. I said, I'm in ninth grade. No one does unpaid internships in ninth grade. They said, well, if you don't want this job bad enough, then we can't help you anymore. So they said, we'll support you through this career path if you decide to work hard at it. I took this internship in ninth grade, writing for a local newspaper, nothing to do with sports because their sports department was across the bridge. I couldn't drive yet. I had to stay local. I was writing news briefs for 8 months. It was worth it though.
In terms of the news briefs that you did, how important was that in shaping what you're doing now in terms of sports gambling and betting?
I remember going in on the interview. I remember the editor of the newspaper. He started just cursing out of nowhere, and my mom was with me. He did it as a test. He wanted to see what my background was family wise and if I was able to hold my own in a newsroom. When my mom looked at him, he said, I did that on purpose. I wanted to make sure you're okay because this language is used in this newsroom. She goes, I don't care. Of course, you could do whatever you want. My daughter's not sensitive. We're not that kind of sensitive type. Sure enough, 8 months go by. I remember my first news brief, the editor looked at it. I wrote it kind of like a story. It wasn't really written in a journalistic way because I had no journalism experience. I was 14, 15 years old. Then he rips it up in my face, says, this is, I don't even want to use the words. Then he said, try it again. I said, what? Okay. It made me stronger. A lot of people in ninth grade don't know anything about getting constructive criticism aside from maybe homework assignments that the teacher might have edited for them or getting a bad grade on a test. I was in the real workforce getting treated like a real employee by somebody that got the okay from my mother to talk badly to me in a sense to make sure that I got better at my job. He did just that. It helped me build thick skin at such a young age in the business. I think that was really important, not just for developing my skill, also just learning how to be in the work environment and learning not to take things too personally.
Hmm. What did your peers and your friends think about this experience?
They thought it was interesting. Obviously, my family was supportive. My family kept all of the news clippings that they got out of the newspaper of all my news briefs that I wrote. That was kind of cool to be published at such a young age. My friends, they didn't understand. to this day, sometimes my friends don't understand all of the hours and crazy work weeks that we could have in the world of sports. When it's football season, I essentially lose touch with everybody. Then after football, I send the texts out and I say, hey guys, I'm back. I have a day off this week. It's something that even at a young age, when you're committed to this industry, you have to learn to make some kind of sacrifice. My friends at the time thought it was so strange that I was working some kind of job at a local newspaper, yet now they see what it's led to. My friends, my family, ever since I took that internship in ninth grade, have always had my back because they knew from that moment on, when I didn't quit 2 days a week for 8 months doing newspaper, like writing for a newspaper, they knew how dedicated I was to this field.
Fabulous. And I mean, so you start in ninth grade being published, and this leads you to going to Syracuse University for their communications program. How was that experience, not only getting into Syracuse University in such a lauded program that, hundreds and hundreds of people would kill to go there for journalism, but how was that experience studying journalism and studying communications and really honing your skills there?
I loved my experience at Syracuse. I actually have to give a lot of credit to who used to be the head of the Newhouse sports department, and that was John Nicholson. He helped me get into the Newhouse program. He helped me just guide my way through the sports program. There was no exact sports program, yet he was in the process of developing it. The experience I gained that were just tangible, hands on experiences at Syracuse you don't normally get at a lot of schools. For example, my senior year, Syracuse made it to the Final Four. I was one of 7 student media members who was flown down, kept in a hotel, and able to go cover the Final Four as a member of the media. I got to meet so many people. I was on my own, shooting stand ups, doing radio hits at the Final Four, and I'm not even out of college yet. I love that Syracuse has all these programs where you can host your own shows that it was Z89 was where I hosted my own 2-3 hour talk show every week. WAER, you could all of the students who are at WAER, they get to travel to all the home and road games for Syracuse football, basketball, lacrosse. It's not just about the classroom, it's about what's outside. I remember I was in my what we call the capstone class, BDJ 465, which is your last class of senior year for your major. I remember saying to my teacher, I got invited to go to the Final Four. I have to miss 3 days of class. Is that okay? Mind you, it's close to the end of the semester. The teacher said, there's no better experience than actually going to an event and getting experience. As long as you produce some stand ups to show to class, you can go and you can miss class. That supportive role that the teachers play when you're at Syracuse at Newhouse, the understanding that this is all to get those kinds of experiences made going to Syracuse all worthwhile.
Mm, that is such a classic SU story. I love it. I love it. So, okay, so you're at Syracuse and you're thinking your senior year of your next steps, and you got to cover the Final Four, which is huge for your resume. Going into the workforce as a senior and looking at your options, what was that like for you?
Stressful, extremely stressful. I had a few jobs that offered I had a few places that offered me jobs. They didn't feel right. There one of them was in a really small market in the 200s range. I thought to myself, and I watched their newscasts too. They were very amateur. In fact, Syracuse's newscasts, part of the school of Newhouse, their newscasts were more professional looking than this news station that asked to hire me. So I turned it down. It was really tough because I didn't want to turn down opportunities since I was just fresh out of college. Yet I also didn't want to jump on an opportunity just because it was a job either. You also have to remember when you work in TV, you sign these 2-3 year contracts. I had to make sure that I was going to be happy with wherever I was going to live alone, nonetheless, with all these people that I've never met before. It's not like college where everyone's new freshman year. You're moving to a place where it's a strange place and you don't know anybody. Then I decided to hold out. It took a few months. So I graduated in May of 2016. In August of 2016, I ended up getting an interview with the ABC station in New Bern, North Carolina, WCTI. It felt right. I thought North Carolina was a very normal area. I watched their newscasts, very professional looking. I decided to go down there. I do the interview. I really like the sports director. Him and I are still very close. In fact, we got along well. And I was really happy that I was able to take a job there. Also, what helped my experience from Syracuse to North Carolina, being able to go cover the events, not even just the Final Four, just covering a normal Syracuse basketball game, it helps to prepare you for when you go and cover college or professional events when you move on to your job. You then realize what the structure's like. I know I can go and get free media food. I didn't know that when I first went to college. My first media event that I covered, I remember thinking, wait, this is free? This is for us? People said, yeah, you get the food. It's media food. Now I go into a normal professional setting. I could go get the media food. I feel okay about it. It's the hardest part for me, honestly, in adjusting to the workforce right out of college was feeling like I belonged. There's so many people. I was covering Duke, North Carolina games. I was covering Panthers games. There are so many people who are around you that have been in the business for 20 years. When you look around and you just started a few months ago, you start to think, just just calm down. It's okay. You're meant to be here.
Hmm. And having a sense of belonging, especially as a woman in this industry, that's a huge issue. It's a huge topic to grapple with, and also imposter syndrome. I know that's something that a lot of us, really come to terms with sometimes. Not everyone, but some of us. As a woman in this field, did you experience any obstacles or any feelings of doubt about what you were doing?
It's tough sometimes. You have to prove yourself a lot more. Granted, I won't say tough in the sense that I've had bad experiences with people. I really haven't. I have so many supportive people in my history of this industry that I don't have anything bad to say about how I've necessarily been treated by coworkers. When it comes to the viewers, that's different. You have to build your credibility in a way a man never really has to. In my first few months in North Carolina, it was really hard. It was because you're also not just covering the pro sports that you're used to. In local news, you're covering the high schools. Even if you know football well, you could get tripped up on air just because you don't know the players well. I don't know some of these high school players. We're covering 45 different schools. It's very tough to know who the sophomore backup wide receiver is when the senior gets hurt. It just, but when you're watching it from a viewer perspective, they think, how do you not know that player? That's your job. They don't realize that I'm covering 45 other schools in the area. I can't learn all of these rosters. When you don't sound like you know what you're talking about on air, if you mess up somebody's name, they don't care if you don't know. They don't care if you know the sport. They think you don't know anything because you messed up a player's name. That was something I had to get used to, was figuring out how to just, if I got a little tripped up on air, confused, making sure I stay confident, because people could pick up on it so quickly if you're not confident. As a female, you just have to have confidence at all times, or else you're not going to be believable if you don't even believe in what you're saying. I also think that what I tell women all the time in this industry who are up and coming, you have to have facts and stats to back up what you're saying. You can't just go and say that somebody on this NFL team is bad at, let's just say there's a quarterback that's struggling. Drew Lock, for example, of the Denver Broncos. I just can't come on and say Drew Lock's a bad quarterback. I'll get ripped apart by people because they'll say, what do you know about football? You've never played. If I say Drew Lock has been struggling lately because X, Y, and Z, and I give you all the stats to back it up, no one can say no about that. That's what I think I've learned the most. Don't just make assumptions. Make sure that you have stats and facts to back up everything you say, because then nobody can tell you that you're wrong.
Hmm. Hmm. So you're going from sports, or you went from sports to sports betting, which is a whole other element. What was the learning curve for you coming into SportsGrid and being a sports betting analyst for them?
There was a decent curve. I really loved fantasy sports my whole life. Since I was in 6th grade, I was playing fantasy baseball. In fact, I was kicked out of my fantasy baseball league by 7th grade because the boys got mad I won 2 years in a row. Anyway, I was into betting a little bit because of fantasy. I liked betting props. I just didn't live in states where it was legal to bet, so I didn't get overly involved in it as I did with fantasy. When I came over to SportsGrid a couple of years ago, I knew sports betting was going to be the way of the future. It just was going that way. PASPA was repealed. They ended up getting sports betting, mobile sports betting in the state of New Jersey. I live in New York, so it's close. I remember thinking, okay, this is it. This gambling thing's going to take off. I go to SportsGrid. They were transitioning from fantasy to gambling. They wanted me to be a part of that transition. What we tried to do is take sports talk show radio, parlay it with the gambling world. You can have normal breaking news kinds of conversations like any sports talk show that you'd be listening to. You can also add in the gambling aspect of it. That's what we try to do on our show the morning after every weekday morning from 9 a.m. to 12. We have a lot of fun being able to take the big storylines, talk about how it's affected the gambling community. When you're talking about any kind of transition, I love this transition. I was so over the whole everyone trying to be the hot take of sports angle. I like the math. I like the logic. I like seeing why certain storylines are moving these lines. How do you get ahead of the market? The same exact way anybody would be looking at a stock market. That's how I'm looking at the FanDuel Sportsbook currently. It's just predicting the future and being able to take all of that knowledge and put it into something of substance, which is the market, not just because it's a hot take.
Wow, I heard I like the math, and I was like, I wish I could relate. I was personally never a math person. I'm like, I like the math. Wow, that's profound to me.
Yeah, journalism majors and communications majors don't normally like math. I like algebra, which is funny because I like finding X. I don't like other things such as calculus or trigonometry, all that stuff. When it came to algebra, I love finding X. I kind of look at sports books and sports betting like finding X. I use the props market that way too. I try to find all of the different reasons as to why the numbers could add up into giving me a little value when I'm trying to bet on anything, whether it's a prop, a game, or a total.
Mm-hmm. So, for someone that has no knowledge at all about sports betting, how would you explain it to them?
Whew. The thing that's getting sports betting to be popular is because it's tangible. It's something that's interactive with the actual viewer, especially during COVID times when people couldn't go to games, yet we had games a few months after everything got shut down. Everyone was going from home and betting. They actually had the largest handle ever for UFC, the first fight that UFC had when it came out of the whole quarantine or the COVID hiatus. The sports books are a way for fans and people to be able to get involved in the game. There were so many things that I would never watch. There are games that I would never watched if it weren't for betting on it. I was on a podcast a few weeks ago where they said, why would I watch a Detroit Pistons game? I said, because I had their center Mason Plumlee in a prop. You get involved, you get invested. That's why I think sports betting is going to take off. It's just a way for anyone who's not the casual fan to have fun with it. My grandma just bet on the Super Bowl. She watched the Super Bowl. She bet the Tampa Bay Buccaneers money line. She was so excited. She won $50. She took me to dinner. I just think that it's a really fun way for people to have fun watching a game and not have to worry about taking it so seriously by just sitting there if you're not really a diehard sports fan.
I love that. Go, Grandma. That is so cool.
She crushed it.
I know, as you expressed, we are still in COVID and dealing with trying to still work under those parameters. But what does a day-to-day work life look for you now?
The way it changed, we used to be in the city, in a studio. It was in Midtown New York City. Now we're working from home. SportsGrid and I have kind of put together this whole home studio setup where I have this background. I have a bunch of lights. I'm in my bedroom. There's no big studio around me. I'm in my bedroom. Sometimes my dogs lay on my bed next to me. The thing I love about it is I don't have to commute. Commuting was the worst. I was waking up at 5 a.m., taking a train into Manhattan, starting my show at 9, leaving at 12. taking another hour 20 train home. Now I save all that time. I wake up in the morning. I do a little bit more research as to what I might have missed the night before. Then after the show ends on my Monday through Friday show, when the show ends at noon, I end up just kind of going through clips from the show, finding out what I think would be really good for social media, communicating with our editors. We get a lot of different clips up on social media all throughout the course of the day. Our best, I think, one of our favorite segments is Till Bet Do Us Part. It's our best bets video. Everyone's been going crazy over Till Bet Do Us Part. It's funny because my co-host and I came up with the idea initially as dares. If you lose a bet, then the other person gets to dare you to do something. I wanted to pie him in the face. Then COVID happened. We stuck with the title, though, Till Bet Do Us Part. It's a funny play on words, especially because he's a guy and I'm a girl. Doesn't mean anything. Trust me, guys. It means nothing. Yeah, we just have a lot of fun with it. I also do a lot of different podcasts. We have a partnership with the FanDuel Sportsbook. On FanDuel, we do a lot of different promotions, especially with the Knicks on MSG Network. We do a segment right before the Knicks pregame show for every Knicks game. It's been a lot of fun. I think what I've learned a lot from working from home, I've gotten to do a lot more with my time instead of having to travel back and forth. I think everybody should have some kind of home studio, even if they're in a studio, even if it's COVID, whatnot, and you still get to go to a studio. I think it's important. We've been able to create so much more content because I can just come up to my room and start talking to my camera as opposed to having to be in the studio to do it.
I 100% agree about that. Where do you see the future of sports betting and fantasy sports in the next couple of years?
There have been owners of teams that have said sports betting is about to be just as important to a sports team as beer vendors, which is crazy to consider. I think that sports betting is going to end up similar to what you're seeing in DC, similar to what you're seeing in Chicago, where they have now made sports books attached to stadiums or right next door. Even in New Jersey, the Meadowlands has one across the street. I think you're going to see a lot more stadiums put sports betting inside the stadium. You go to a game, you have your ticket, you have your popcorn, you get a hot dog, and you go to the sports book, you place some bets, you sit there with your ticket. There might even be a bar inside. You could be at the game at Yankee Stadium while also getting to go inside the sports book, see all the TVs of all the other different games, and have your ticket there and know that you could be betting. It also helps because I think similar to what you could have from if a restaurant's attached to a stadium, once the game's over, you could go hang out at the sports book. When I used to work at the FanDuel Sportsbook prior to COVID, we have a studio there as well. After any kind of Jets or Giants game, fans would leave, even if it was halftime, they would leave the game because the Jets and Giants are horrible. They would leave at halftime, come to the sports book, and finish their football Sunday watching games and betting. I think that's the future. Of course, mobile wagering is really important too. Having just the ability to sit at home and bet on your phone is so important for the handle. That's why you're seeing New Jersey surpass Las Vegas in betting handle on a monthly basis. People could just bet from home. New York's going to do it in the next year or two. I hope in the next year. I think once New York does it, it's just a ripple effect of everybody else following.
But I wouldn't be surprised to see this all go down within the next 2 years. So a lot to take in. What teams are you betting on, Ariel? I don't know if you're doing your own betting yourself, but if you were to bet on some of your favorite teams, who would they be?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I do a lot of prop betting. I bet on players individually. Instead of really betting on a side, it's kind of been my bread and butter to go and bet on these player props. Yet, if I would have to say there's a team to bet on right now, it would be the Utah Jazz. You can't have favorites. You can't have a favorite team to bet because eventually they go on a losing streak. Eventually, a team could go on a winning streak. You can't really bet with your heart all the time. I'm a Yankees fan. I'm a Ravens fan. I like to stay away from betting my own teams. Sometimes I feel my heart gets in the way of my head. I'd rather just stay away. There might be some players that I do like betting. Eventually, the market catches up with you. For example, a few of the players in the NBA that I really like to bet on just individually, Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors. I loved this prop called rebounds plus assists, where you add up his rebounds and assists throughout the course of the game. For about, I would say, a month, The sportsbook's number was really low on him and he kept hitting it. I bet it, I bet it, I bet it. Then the sportsbook adjusted and they raised the number a little bit. So instead of it being Draymond Green, rebounds plus assists totals to over 15 and a half, today it was 17 and a half. Now it's a little too high for me and I backed off of it. That's why you have to be able to adjust. Sometimes it takes a little while for the sportsbook to adjust. When they do, you have to learn it's okay to back off. You can bet on, a lot of people will bet on their favorite teams.
Mhm.
People will go and just bet. That's what's funny. So we were talking today to the director of the FanDuel Sportsbook, John Sheeran. We asked him which college basketball team was the team that, if let's just say this college basketball team wins the entire NCAA tournament, which team would lose the sports book a lot of money? He said Michigan. Michigan just went live for betting about a month or two ago. It's because they have a huge fan base out in Michigan. So many of their fans are betting on Michigan to win March Madness. Now the sports book, it's called liability. The sports book has a lot of liability on Michigan to win NCAA tournament. Half of that, yes, Michigan has been really good the last couple of months. They've really earned their way up in the rankings. They're not the third best team in the country. However, it also stems back to Michigan now having betting, Michigan having a huge fan base, especially out there in Ann Arbor. A lot of their fans are betting them even before they went on this hot streak.
This is so fascinating. I feel like I'm going to eventually start getting into sports betting. I think it's going to happen before the end of 2021. My next question for you, Ariel, for any aspiring sports journalists who are seeing the trajectory of where sports betting and fantasy sports are going, and they want to hop on the wave, what advice would you give to those in school studying for journalism or just having some sort of inkling about getting into this career path?
It's tough. I always say to people, you have to just really, really work hard and continue to hone your craft. It took a lot for me to try to kind of fall into this. I do feel like I got lucky falling into SportsGrid. It was a website. I always laugh SportsGrid at points in time when I first started. I felt it was a website you'd go buy a fake ID off of, honestly. Yet it's developed into something amazing. We've had the best support system. The people I work for are amazing people. I feel lucky. It took a lot of hard work. I hired a broadcast coach, Jill Montgomery. She's amazing. I highly recommend her. It changed my career. I was unemployed back in 2019, I think. Yeah, 2019. I left my job in North Carolina. It was time to come home. I didn't want to re-sign another 2-3 year contract. I figured I'll try to figure it out in New York, or I'll maybe get another job in local news. I didn't really know where my path was taking me. I worked in minor league baseball a little bit. I hired the broadcast coach. We continued to just hone my craft at a minor league baseball team that wasn't even an affiliate of anybody. It was a Canadian American League baseball team. It had nothing to do with any professional baseball team in the majors. We just continued to get better on air. Then I found SportsGrid from a friend of a friend who posted, and now my co-host Jared Smith, he posted it on Twitter that he was now working for SportsGrid. I reached out to him, then spoke to the bosses that are my bosses now. That's kind of how SportsGrid became SportsGrid, was through social media and pushing it that way. That's how I found it. I would just tell people, reach out to anybody you can. At that time, Jared was very new to SportsGrid, so he couldn't say to necessarily hire me yet because he just started about a week before he posted that video that I saw. I went on LinkedIn and I found the president of SportsGrid, Lou Mayon. I reached out to him on LinkedIn and he got me an interview. Otherwise, it would have never happened. You just have to reach out to everybody. I'll tell this story too. When I was a freshman in college, my dream was always to work for the Yankees. That's where my love for sports started. I reached out to a man on LinkedIn who worked for the Yankees. He told me he'd keep me in mind. Okay, great. Never heard from him. Reached out again. Hey, keep me in mind. Sure enough, he told me, well, sorry, we don't have any openings right now. I can't really help. Then my grandparents went to a bar mitzvah. They saw a man who had 10 World Series rings on on each of his fingers, a World Series ring on all 10 of his fingers. They asked who he was. He's the COO of the Yankees, Lantrost. My grandparents don't care. They go up to him. They say, my granddaughter's always wanted to be a Yankees employee. What can she do to try to do that? He said to them, have her send her resume in by October. Of course, my resume was in by October. I go to meet him. This was my junior year going into senior year of college. So I'm looking for my final internship before I graduate. I go to the interview and he says pretty much the way the system works when you intern for the Yankees is we just interview you, we offer it to you. You don't know which department you end up in because we just decide for you. Of course, I reach out to the man that I spoke to on LinkedIn prior who works in the video department. He said, okay, well, we don't have an internship. Let me talk to my boss. They both spoke to each other, created an internship for me because I kept in touch with this man for 3 years. He's not even the one that got me the interview, yet he put me in the department I wanted because I kept in touch with him for 3 years. That was a long-winded story, but it's all about networking.
Wow, that is insane. That is insane. But that shows persistence, hard work, being at the right place at the right time, determination, a little bit of luck, and some manifestation, to be quite honest. So thank you for sharing that story. That is super inspirational. And my last question for you, really, Ariel, is what will become of what you're working on this year? What do you have in store? What can we look out for? Are you working on any side projects as well?
No side projects. Everything I do is pretty much out in the open for social media to see. We really just keep on growing the morning after on SportsGrid. As I mentioned before, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on the East Coast, Monday through Friday. I also host during the football season, I host a Sunday show from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Sunday before NFL kickoff. It's called Pro Football Today. On SportsGrid, we just keep expanding. We're going to expand with the gambling community. The more that gambling is brought out to the mainstream, the more that it's legalized in each state, the bigger that a sports betting network gets. SportsGrid's unique because there's nothing like it. Every network has one gambling show, essentially. They have content that they might put out, digitally speaking. Yet when it comes to the actual programming of their television content, it's not 24/7. It's mixed in with all their other newsy talk shows. At SportsGrid, it's 24/7 sports gambling only. It's also on Sirius XM channel 204. We launched on Sirius a few months ago. That's been really exciting. You could just go into your car anywhere you are in the country. You could turn on Sirius XM channel 204. You instantly know you're getting gambling content. Whatever you need, it's the stock market, whether you watch MSNBC or Fox Business, whatever you watch to consume your stock market your stock market information, we're that for sports gambling at SportsGrid.
I always love to end every interview with you. I mean, you've pretty much done it in terms of just letting us know what you're going to be up to for the rest of the year, but also your social media angles and your platforms, if you don't mind sharing that with everyone watching so they can follow you and figure out and find out what you will be talking about and doing in the future.
On Twitter, it's Ariel Epstein, Instagram and TikTok, Ari Epst. I'm trying the TikTok thing. I have a 13-year-old brother who pretty much is my source for figuring out where to go next to try to reach out to the younger demographic. TikTok is where he consumes all his information now, which is kind of scary. So I've gone to TikTok to try to give it some credibility. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Yeah, I think those are the three.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ariel. This was very fun. I'm very glad we got to meet. And from one Syracuse alum to the next, congratulations on your success. And I'll be looking out to see what else you'll be coming up with.
Thank you. It seemed to you. Go Qs.
Go Qs. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching In the Zone. Stay tuned for more amazing interviews with your host, Candace Cordelia.